The Galactic Academy's Xenobiology lecture hall fell into the kind of silence that precedes either enlightenment or catastrophe. Professor Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in what could generously be called controlled panic as the containment field around the specimen cage flickered and died with a pathetic electronic whimper. Inside the now unprotected enclosure, 8 feet of pure nightmare uncoiled itself with predatory grace. The Vorkanian Death-Stalker was everything its name promised, and more. A serpentine horror covered in chitinous armor that gleamed like oil under the lecture hall lights. 6 razor-sharp limbs sprouted from its elongated torso, each tipped with claws that could slice through reinforced titanium. Its triangular head swiveled on a flexible neck, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that dripped with paralytic venom. 23 students from 12 different species pressed themselves against the back wall of the amphitheater-style classroom. The Zephyrian twins chittered in their native tongue, probably praying to whatever deities watched over their gaseous homeworld. A crystalline from Nexus Prime actually began to fade, attempting to phase shift to safety. Even the usually fearless Ursan delegate, all 7 feet and 400 pounds of him, had gone remarkably pale beneath his fur. All except for 2 humans in the front row. Liza Martinez, a xenobiology major from Earth's New Geneva colony, had her tablet out and was frantically taking notes. Her dark eyes gleamed with scientific fascination as she observed the creatures, musculature and movement patterns. Beside her, James Chen leaned forward in his seat, his expression one of genuine curiosity rather than terror. "Fascinating," Liza whispered, her stylus dancing across her tablet screen. "Look at the way its neural crest flares when it perceives threat responses from the other students. It's reading our biochemical signatures." Professor Zethkar, a normally composed Altarian with decades of teaching experience, was backing slowly toward the emergency alert button. The Death-Stalker's head tracked his movement with mechanical precision. "Nobody move," Zethkar hissed through his translator unit. "These creatures hunt by detecting micro-vibrations and fear pheromones. The containment breach protocol requires—" "Can I pet it?" James interrupted, raising his hand as if he were asking about homework. The silence that followed was so profound that it seemed to have physical weight. Every being in the room, including the Death-Stalker, turned to stare at the human who had just asked to pet one of the galaxy's most feared predators. "I beg your pardon?" Professor Zethkar's translator struggled with what it clearly interpreted as a malfunction in James's neural pathways. James stood up slowly, ignoring the collective intake of breath from his classmates. "Well, you mentioned in last week's lecture that Vorkanian Death-Stalkers are actually highly intelligent and form complex social bonds. Their aggression is primarily defensive, triggered by perceived threats to their territory or young." The creature's head tilted, almost like a confused dog. Its 6 limbs relaxed slightly from their attack posture. "The fear pheromones everyone's pumping out are probably making it more agitated," James continued conversationally, taking a careful step forward. "But humans don't produce the same biochemical markers as most galactic species. We might not trigger its threat response the same way." Liza looked up from her tablet, her face lighting up with understanding. "Of course, Terran mammals evolved completely separate neural pathways for threat assessment. Our fight-or-flight responses are built around different neurotransmitters than the standard galactic genome." "This is madness," wheezed an Altarian student from the back. "That thing killed 17 soldiers on Kepler Station." "Because they came in with weapons and aggressive intent," James replied, taking another step toward the Death-Stalker. The creature watched him with what almost looked like curiosity. "But we're not soldiers, we're students." The Death-Stalker's head lowered slightly, its crystalline teeth retracting. A low, rumbling sound emerged from its throat, not the hiss of aggression that Professor Zethkar had expected, but something almost like a purr. James extended his hand slowly, palm up, the universal gesture of peaceful intent that seemed to transcend species barriers. "That's it, big guy. Nobody here wants to hurt you." "James, be careful," Liza warned. Though her scientific excitement was obvious, even if it's not actively aggressive, those claws are still— The Death-Stalker's nearest limb reached out tentatively, its razor-sharp claw barely grazing James's palm. The contact lasted only a moment before the creature pulled back, but something had changed in its posture. The predatory tension had melted away, replaced by what could only be described as curiosity. Incredible, Professor Zethkar breathed. In 40 years of xenobiology, I've never seen a Vorkanian Death-Stalker exhibit non-aggressive behavior toward an unknown species. James took another step forward, and this time the Death-Stalker met him halfway. Its massive head descended until it was level with the human's chest, and that rumbling purr grew louder. Very carefully, James raised his hand and placed it on the creature's armored skull. The Death-Stalker leaned into the touch. "Well, I'll be damned," muttered the Urson student. "It's all about context and approach," Liza said, her tablet forgotten, as she watched the impossible scene unfold. Humans have this weird ability to see potential companions where other species see only threats. We domesticated wolves when most sentient species would have run screaming. The Death-Stalker's 6 limbs folded beneath it as it settled onto the floor, its head still pressed against James's hand. The purring had become almost musical, resonating through the floor of the lecture hall. "This is why humans are so dangerous," Professor Zethkar said, though his tone held more admiration than fear. "They don't see a Death-Stalker. They see a very large, very lonely animal that's far from home." James looked back at his classmates, most of whom were still pressed against the far wall. "Anyone else want to try? I think he's friendly once. You get past the whole evolved killing machine thing." The Vorkanian Death-Stalker, perhaps the first in galactic history, actually seemed to nod in agreement. Later, the incident would be studied in xenopsychology courses across the galaxy. The phrase, "Can I pet it?" would become shorthand for humanity's bizarre tendency to befriend the universe's most dangerous creatures. But in that moment, in a lecture hall where 23 students learned that sometimes the most terrifying predator just needed someone to see past its fearsome exterior, James simply continued to pet what was arguably the galaxy's most effective killing machine. And the Death-Stalker purred,